Let me ask you a question before we begin. How many programmers does it take to change a light bulb?
3.
3? Okay. Who else?
0.
0? Closer?
-1.
-1. Yeah, none. That's a hardware problem. So it's a joke, but it has a part of a joke, because if you know how to develop, if you know how to program and automate, in our case, you do less hard work, you do less fun work. That's what our goal is going to be, to get you there. Before we go forward, I would like to introduce myself and also my partner, and have some introduction about our background, where we're coming from. So my name is Slava, and current position is a senior software development manager at Oracle. And I was pretty lucky to be in many fields, not only development, but automation. And with automation, I have worked with many frameworks, Java, Ruby. Now it's pretty modern frameworks like a JavaScript framework and others. I have set up those from the ground up. I also working as a certified Scrum Master, and I transitioned many old frameworks to the newer concept, such as page object pattern, usage, factory method, and so on. And I have worked with many frameworks in UI automation, mobile automation, web services such as REST API, SOAP API, database automation, and so on. So you're welcome to ask questions about those different fields, and we'll go with the class and we'll see what else we can teach you as we go forward. I also have patent pending in automation architecture solutions. So I kind of was a lot of involvement in that area. And the most important of all is I'm a former Portnov Computer School student. Ooh. Right, so I'll give a couple of minutes to Elina to introduce herself and her experience.
My name is Elina, and I'm an automation engineer at Workday. I finished this school 8 years ago and got my first position in Taleo Oracle, then moved to the manual position, then to automation, met Slava. Slava was my manager for 2 years. Now we're just good friends, and I help him to for this class. So what we'll do at this class? Practice, practice, and practice. And the key of success is homework. So what our class usually is Slava explaining everything on the board, and I'm helping people at the class. So if you have some questions or status assignments, raise your hand and come and don't disturb Slava. Raise your hand.
You can disturb me. That's okay. But you'll see a lot of Lina there.
Okay, let's start.
Thank you, Lina. So yeah, basically we had many trials and also errors. So we'll teach you based on our experience. So there is no ideal way as per se. There is different point of views. So I just want to make sure you understand that we'll teach you from our experience. There may be different opinions, there may be different approaches, but we'll deliver to you what we know the best and what worked the best from our perspective. So we're kind of looking like this in the picture. So what's expected from your side? Be computer savvy, so be comfortable installing new applications, working with applications, programs, and have basic HTML experience. So as I know you guys worked with already as QA engineers, that's definitely help you to get forward. And I would expect from you also come with the cases of manual test cases that you would like to automate. That can be also the first good first step for you to kind of get into the field. You're not expected to work like that, but please ask questions if you have any, as far as I go. And you're really encouraged to do homework. I'll be giving you homework after each lesson, and the next lesson we'll be reviewing it. So we have 80 hours on the class, and we expect at least as much time you spend home at the homework. Okay? So we'll provide you details with the contacts, and we'll find a way to communicate with you to make sure you're successful. So we want you be successful, but we expect from you also an effort to get there. Because without an effort, you don't get anywhere. And we are here to help you. So if you put the right amount of work, then you'll have much more options on the job market than your manual position that you are in right now. In automation, there is a complete new field and complete new money and options available for you. I would like to talk a bit about history and just to really high summary about how did we get to web automation? How did we get to Selenium, WebDriver? So how did it start? So at some point, we only had manual testing used, and pretty much developers did all the tests as well. And we had some elements of automation, but they were restricted by some unit tests, which were written by developers. Some continuous integration elements, but not really the way it looks now. And we did have some of the many cases in automation, like most likely recording or proprietary tools, and but they were not really super effective on a global scale and not being able to catch up with the rapid growth of development itself. And then JSON Huggins happened. Actually, this is one of the early automation conferences. That's a real big picture. I think Jason is here on the right. So actually, now he looks like this. So he actually created a revolution in web automation by creating Selenium. And he actually didn't get much money out of it, so just he shared it with the world. And all at this point, contemporary solutions that we have, all these automation tools is based on his initial input that he has created. That's the person that was behind of all it started. Even though that he puts it together, he worked alone at that point, and then more and more people started to be involved, interested in his solutions. But still, mostly developers were the guys who did all the work. And then as QA field, QA industry has grown, there is a separate cast of engineers came to the picture which only be doing automation, not any manual test. So they become QA automation engineers. And as it grown and it comes to our day-to-day life now, we have pretty grown the process. We have the full-blown process called continuous integration, continuous delivery, which we'll talk about and we'll do some practice around it to see how it works. And it pretty much involves all the engineers together, from development, QA engineers, and QA automation engineers. There's a part to play for each engineers here. So now we have also a new concept called test-driven development and behavior-driven development, which we'll look pretty closely. That's about Cucumber. That's a behavior-driven development framework that we'll be talking about. That's how it's used nowadays. I would like to talk about today, how does automation being used? How is it being used in the companies? How is it being utilized right now? How is it used? And to understand that, let's take a look a bit closer into different phases of development. So when program gets written, so it first starts when? On developers' computers, right? That's where it starts. And after it's ready, it goes to what? GitHub. It's a source control where code is being kept. But eventually it gets deployed to QA environment. Right? That's QA environment. It's the next step. It's something like we have, if you talk about Facebook, we have some separate environment, QA facebook.com. So it's not available for everyone. It's for new features who just written and need to be tested, make sure they're good. Only available for QA engineers within the company. Same as for Wells Fargo, same for any other companies as well. So that's kind of next phase after it gets out of computers. And then before it's released, this stage is called differently at different companies. Sometimes people call it staging environment. Sometimes it goes right away from QA environment to production. Sometimes it's called pre-production environment. But there's some phase at most companies that I've noticed when deployment happens and it stays there for final cycle of test before it gets released. So the most common name I have found is pre-production. That's the most common name that it is named. So that's at this point there's some testing going on as well as automation going on. And finally it gets to production. And this is normally a pretty fast process, and this process also is supported by automation engineers. So that's all the cycles. Let's take a look a bit closer at each level. So how automation used at each cycle here. So when the program is still at computer of developer, right? So it's right here. It's still, it gets use of automation at this point. So there's some tools that we use, for example, it's called headless tests. They're pretty short, and to use real browsers, but to use them in the special mode. It's called headless. Headless means that they're not actually seen on the screen. That's the way they're faster. They not get distracted. People not get distracted by looking at here. I'll also teach you how to make a browser headless at some point. So you'll see the effect in its most cases doesn't affect the test, especially if it's short. That's the way to go. The point is that at this level, when application implemented on developers' computers, most of the test happens at unit test, some kind of static code analyzers. That's purely for developers. But some automation gets started even at this level. So smoke test can be used by developers before commit, and it can be even automated. So it happens without any involvement of actual person. That's called continuous integration. That's what it's about. Okay. So even at this level, when we just starting with the code, some automation can be used here. But the real play starts at the next phase, which is QA environment. And that's when the most action happens. That's the longest phase that is getting and going to be used. Of course, the manual test happens a lot at this level. And there's certain kind of level of tests. And I'm talking about mostly agile environment, Scrum agile environment, because there's different methodologies like waterfall. I'm going to focus on agile. That's the most startup are, and that's most companies moving onto in Silicon Valley. That's kind of new concept of seeing things. So in this level, we have so-called acceptance script. So acceptance is the level of script that does more thorough verification comparing to smoke. So when you talk about this kind of level, so smoke test is really basic verification of automation. It normally takes not much time. It's not exactly time bound. So you cannot say it's taking 1 minute or 5 minutes. But normally it's below 5 minutes time frame when we talk about automation. And most of cases, it's even a minute or 2 minutes. That's a smoke test. The next level of deeper verification of application is acceptance. And this concept is used a lot when you talk about automation. So when you write automation scripts, we call in this concepts. So acceptance comes next. So what do you think of acceptance? How much bigger it is? If you talk about smoke, what do you think?
A little bigger than accept than smoke prior to the release.
Yeah, it's only it's not regression yet. It's not like bigger, but it is.
Basically, it's a quick,
Yeah.
quick test.
Mhm.
And what we do, smoke
Mhm.
test.
That's a smoke test.
Overall, yeah.
And yeah, so in the next level, kind of bigger, it's called also sanity sometimes, sanity test. So we call it acceptance, our company. And it's normally taking, like if you talk about time, like 15 minutes time. And it's also called environment verification. So application runs on multiple computers involving multiple servers. But this test verifies kind of integrity of deployment. Everything is fine, everything is up and running. Such as reporting run, you can run report, you can run search and find some data. You can do kind of deeper test at this level, and we're talking about 15-minute time frame here. And finally, we have a biggest regression script. So who can tell me what regression is?
Regression is any changes we made, like we deploy.
Mm-hmm.
There's some changes we need to deploy in pre-production. We need to go through the regression testing,
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure we do those changes and no impact on other components.
So regression test verifies that production functionality works as expected
Yes.
after new functionality was introduced. Nothing gets broken that works in production. That's the focus of regression test. That's the functionality being used by customers. So we don't want anything broken after we just introduce new feature. Sometimes new feature is not as needed by customers, but we want to make sure that not existing feature is broken. So that's a really important test. And it's pretty much as deep as you can go. So this is about, like, we're talking about several hours of test. If we talk about automation, like in our example, we have a multi-thread, like it runs on 6 machines for 5 hours. So like if it was just one machine, it would have been like about 30 hours of continuous test. So it's split and run in parallel, and that's why it takes less time. But it's pretty thorough testing. As you can see, it covers a lot of features. And it's we still do manual tests a lot. So, but it's kind of expanding and removing a lot of heavy load on other QA engineers. And also, there's some concept here which is covered by automation. It's called feature-based automation. And it's kind of coming with agile practices. So feature-based is something that is not production code yet, but it's a new features. So we have a rule for features introduced in the new like integrational development. There are at least some critical points of those features must be covered by automation. So like new features that are not yet released, they also automated. Not everything, it depends on resources you have. But it is covered at critical points. So when it goes to production, it becomes regression test. But until it's released, it's also being tested separately. So it's basically feature-based, and it's something that tests a new functionality that's not yet released. So that's a lot of action happens on QA environment, and all of this, you can see that's the main. So in our case, we have a multiple month release, so we have 3 months, most of which is spent on QA, being developed new features and testing them. Now, the kind of the phase before final is pre-production. So it's something that takes around a couple of weeks if you're talking about multiple month development on QA. Some companies like Facebook, they release pretty often. Some companies can release every week. Some companies can even release every day. But at some level, there's some phases happens even at this level. They just take shorter time. But we also use a lot of features, pretty much everything. So when we just deploy, we still run acceptance. It happens automatically. So we just deploy, it runs. And I'll show you how it works. We use continuous integration that triggers the whole process automatically. Once this is successful, the bigger test comes into picture and verifies all the functionality on pre-production. And of course, feature-based is used as well. So when we expect all of those tests green before going to pre-prod, we expect all of it green here as well. We just have less amount of time to verify everything, but we expect it pretty much still in good shape. So who can tell me, why do we use pre-production? So why not just stay on QA and go straight to production? So why do we use pre-prod?
To make sure that nothing is broken before it goes to the production.
To make sure nothing gets broken before go to prod. But why QA is not enough?
No, because the changes we're making in the by the business to make sure it's tested fully in pre-production before they go live.
So like when we talk about QA environment, right? So you have multiple QA environment that used for multiple different features, right? Like it's kind of maybe multiple environments that used for different features, and then eventually we have kind of pre-prod concept. So pre-prod. So basically, it's also caused by financial limitations, because you cannot spend so much money to have production-ready QA environment servers. And when we go to production, we want to make sure it will run on that machines. So production machines are much more powerful, especially when I'm talking about cloud, which is now really popular, right? Microservices cloud, service-oriented design. It all happens on the cloud. And computers that are supposed to support it should be really powerful and cost a lot of money, and we just don't have such computers on QA environment because of those limitations. But pre-prod machine is exact match of production, so it must be exact match, because you have different versions of application servers, you have different machines, equipment, but pre-prod must be just one of the servers that you use for production. So that's why it's a really important phase to go before we actually release to the customers. because make sure that it still runs on the same machines and it works successfully there. Make sense? All right. And finally, when you go to production, you cannot run regression because we have really limited window. Nowadays, we call it even zero downtime deployment, so customers don't even know that deployment happens. Some companies still have maintenance windows, under which they just turn off computers, deploy, restart them, and so on. And in any case, we don't have much time to verify everything. So we don't go normally with regression feature-based. We just verify manually some critical scenarios, and we go with acceptance tests that make sure infrastructure working. So remember, acceptance is also about infrastructure. Make sure it works well. Okay. So when you'll be working as automation engineers, and I expect all of you will be, if you want it, then you'll be focused on involving and contributing to smoke if you're starting something, or maybe it's already there and you just acknowledge it. You might contribute something to acceptance, which is like deeper test, verifying environment. And you'll be contributing a lot towards regression, production functionality that is released and make sure it's not broken. That's most tests are written, as well as feature-based portion of them. So far, any questions? Yes?
Actually, all my life thought that smoke and acceptance testing is the same thing, and still I cannot comprehend what's the difference between.
Mm-hmm. So you're asking, okay, so smoke acceptance can be same thing, and you just need to know like what's the difference. It's in a way really close. The main point, before we spend, let's say, more time on it, we want to just do real quick verification. Okay, is it good or not?
Basically, smoke to verify the application up and running.
Right.
And acceptance
In a way.
towards it.
Yeah, you can say that smoke, for example, let me give you an example. Smoke test is logging into application, so you can log in, and sometimes you cannot log in if something broken, really critical. And that's why it's called smoke, right? So it's basically smoking, so you don't see this working. And you just call it on the tabs. That's it. You know this initial stage is working. Acceptance is something you go deeper. You don't go as deep as regression, several hours, but you spend around 15 minutes of test, and you take a bit of different functionality to verify it. Make sense? So you just go a bit deeper for acceptance verification. All right? So it's in a way, smoke can be subset of acceptance, and just deeper verification of application and make sure environment is up and running. So like we have like multiple computers, say on multiple servers to run application. So we have let's say main application server that runs your application, like web server. And so when we talk about web application, it's not just one machine that runs somewhere. You connect to the web server, which opens like http://google.com. That's web server. Then there's application server that does calculations and business logic that verifies more deep calculations. And there's also some other like report. So when you generate report, there's a separate server that does it. So there's multiple machines involved. And acceptance verifies all of them. Smoke just verifies maybe one, that it's not completely broken. Make sense?
Basically, smoke is in terms of if you are doing website, basically cosmetic testing.
Yes, maybe it's a very basic level test. Yes.
To be able to access.
All right. Yeah, we'll go forward, and we'll be actually reviewing some case studies when we have manual test. How do we convert it into automation concept? So you can have so we have examples of people working on automation using different technologies, right? So we have some people experienced in different like .NET and Visual Basic. So in our class, we're going to focus on three main technologies. One is Cucumber. Cucumber is about behavior-driven development, and it's just an example of it. It's one of the first that appeared on the market, and it's a framework for this kind of test. We'll be focusing on Java as programming language, and we're going to review the knowledge you need to know to write automated tests, and we're also going to go into knowledge you need to have to pass an interview, because there's sometimes different cases when you have interview questions and you're actually doing the work. So we want to be successful for both cases. And we'll be having some kind of insights about interview questions. So I do a lot of interview myself, including automation and development. And so I know what people ask, and I have also my peers who do interview as QA managers. And I kind of gathered some information about it. So I prepared some kind of highlights, what people ask when they hire nowadays, at least at our company. And Alina gave me some insights from her company. So we kind of created some templates so you can later go over it and learn, and it may be helpful for you to pass an interview. And then finally, we're going to work with WebDriver as basically it's just a set of functions to drive the browser. It's a set of commands that you give to the browser, and it does what you want to do. As well as there is a so-called assertions. It's something that does verification. So you need to drive the browser, then you do verification that behavior is expected as you would do. As you do manual verification, you ask the code, do it for you. Make sense? That's the three main focus areas we're going to talk about. So Cucumber is one of the most popular frameworks for behavior-driven development. And it basically represents the cases that are written in English language in specific format that connected to the code. It's much easier to see how it works and explain it. And that actually comes a really important point at the interview. So you should know exactly by heart the definition. So when somebody asks you, okay, what Cucumber is, you remember it by heart, and I'll give you some definitions to memorize. And also you provide some examples. But essentially, it's just English language test cases in specific format that really easy connected to the code. Okay? Now, Java, I think everybody knows Java. So it's continuous, and it's being developed every year. There's a new version of Java released. And nowadays, Java 9 is on the market. But from automation perspective, you're not really much into the versions. So you can use Java 6, 7, and use them as WebDriver. It's not big deal, big difference. I just chose this most stable one, Java 8, today. So we're going to focus our labs and testing on Java 8. And it's not much going to change from Java 9 perspective, or 10 that's going to be released soon. Every year there's a new version. Now, WebDriver is a very popular set of API, programming commands of web automation. And main goal of WebDriver is to drive the web application. That's pretty much commands to do this. And you add to it assertion when you actually verify, and you have checkpoints that at some point of your execution of test, it is working as expected. And you add a combination of a mix of assertions and WebDriver commands. Any questions about technology stack? Of course, on top of this, we're going to also look into kind of real-life integrations. We're going to look at Jenkins, which is one of the most popular continuous integration servers. So we're going to integrate our tests with Jenkins at some point. We're going to work with source control, which is often overlooked. And we'll use GitHub as a tool to learn. And we're going to use some other tools like debugging tools and some plugins that we used. So we use it all the time when we write tests as engineers. And we're going to teach you pretty much what we are using today. Yes?
There was a gentleman asked if there going to be Gherkin involved.
Yes. Yes, basically. Yes, Gherkin. Okay. Yeah, so as you know, translation Gherkin and Cucumber, they're pretty close, right? Gherkin is just small Cucumber. And when we actually be installing framework, to install Cucumber, you have to install Gherkin plugin. So Gherkin is just a language so Cucumber is a framework, and Gherkin is just a language that is used in this framework. So when we're talking about Cucumber, we talk about the whole framework of being able to run your automation scenario from start to finish, and also get report and get it in specific format and get it done and run on a constant basis. That's Cucumber. And Gherkin is just a language that you use to write the commands in this framework. So then we'll talk about these examples, and it's really super easy part of the course. And I'll talk about it, so that's going to be next class. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, let's talk a bit about experience, like how it got started. we actually at some point, it's happened a few years back, we took two partner computer students as interns. We actually worked on Ruby at that point. And just some experience, they came at different fields. One person had a little bit of programming experience, but not much, forgotten everything. And second person, completely no exposure, no education at all, even. And they worked for 6 months as interns with this framework. The only difference, we had Ruby, which doesn't change much, to be honest with you. And after their internship finished, they both found a job in the new field as automation engineers. And they, for now, still work in the same area. Actually, one person works at Wells Fargo. I think second person switched the third job. And she's like, because she switched jobs, she got much higher money as normally you would get. They both successful, and they're working as automation engineers. So it kind of started this way. And we were thinking, okay, if you can, like, we just took them and educated them, right? And gave them some labs to do, like real examples, and they got successful. So why can't we do it with all the students? So that's how this course started. And we've been doing it at Ruby, and now it's the first run on Java, which is not much difference from the framework perspective, but it's a big difference from technology and interview questions and approaches that you would find. Okay, so that's why it's the first run on Java, and we have a lot of interesting labs for you to go, and as well as interesting interview tasks and questions. So what else I would like to mention? So automation now, it became a very important knowledge to have, especially here in Silicon Valley, and it's spreading across the country. And the concept that it kind of brings together is not just automation, it's a new process of delivering applications, building applications. So it's a bit of, like, you can hear a lot of words about continuous integration, continuous delivery. It's really huge demand right now for specialists in this knowledge. And also non-automation engineers. Like at our company, we don't even call people manual engineers anymore. We just call them functional QA engineers. They are expected to be involved at some extent with automation initiatives. So we have, for example, people who write even manual key, I would say manual key, they do write test cases in Cucumber format and Gherkin language. And they use a source control to commit their code, like GitHub, Git as example. And then it's being taken by automation engineers, and they just add the code to the English sentences written in this format. And then once it's done, new test cases reusing functionality that was automated. So basically all they do is just write English sentences, and they can run them and execute as automated scenarios. So it's really kind of the new concept of delivering applications, as well as it's all being on top of agile environment and Scrum methodologies and all these things together. And I also prepared some videos for you to kind of quickly overview this new technology set and to understand where is actually automation lies in there. Because we want you not just learn automation, but we want you to understand the place automation is, and so that you can better present you at the interview, and you can also defend this knowledge so you know how this is being done. That's what's expected from the engineers at the interview process. Make sense? And so all engineers, even QA engineers, expected to be able to run automated cases, to read reports, to understand. Sometimes reports fail pretty often. And engineers expected to go through the failures and maybe even fix scenarios. And sometimes you don't need to touch the code, you just need to change locators, like XPath locator or CSS locator. And that's we expect from QA engineers nowadays. As many other companies, that's what we're going to teach you on this. And basically be able to understand and understand the concept of false positive. So who knows what false positive is? Like somebody knows it? Like it's a really simple concept, but it's small things that you tell at the interview, and people get excited, especially if you talk to like senior management people. Like basically false positive is a test that failed, but it's not a bug. It's an automation test case bug, if you like it. So you have to fix automation case, not application. It's called false positive. Basically, it's positive failure, but it's not real failure. And you bring these kind of concepts, people get excited and say, oh, we need to hire this guy. Right? And it's hard to argue sometimes with like vice presidents or senior directors, even that you want to. So that's something you can use at the interview, and you should position your interview a bit differently when you talk to engineers and when you talk to higher management, because the higher management expects you to be effective, understand process, and that's what you should use at the interview. Explain how do you know the process. And engineers, you should be able to know how to code, and that's how to get excited. Make sense? Look at some companies, like they have like 5-6 people who interview a different area, even like culture, how do you fit in the team culture. Just the whole interview is about that part. So that's something that will also help you, like probably you know much about it as QA engineers, but it will help you how it related to automation and what questions might be asked there. So, so what we're going to learn? We're going to start with automating scenarios and basically be able to drive browser with simple English sentences, just a Cucumber format. You're going to learn about behavior-driven development. Some functions of WebDriver, that's going to be the next phase. After we are comfortable with Cucumber, the next phase is learning about WebDriver functions. So you can write your own so-called steps, that like blocks that are being used in automation. We'll use Java for our automation examples. And we also review at some point kind of cases that you can convert to automation. That's also really important. Sometimes people have the skills, but they're struggling to apply those. So we'll teach you, and we'll have practice about it. That's the best approach. How to convert existing cases. And I expect you to come with some examples from your work, maybe, and we'll take a look at something that's a great place to get started sometimes. We also learn about pretty much all the types of HTML elements, and I have created a page for you that has most of the HTML elements that you can play with, and that's how we get started with this. And then we'll talk about debugging. So we'll see how group is doing. If a group is fast, you're going to move with the group pace. If somebody needs more time, you're going to spend more time. So it's kind of flexible, because it's really important that we don't move forward until we know really well the topic we are looking into. Otherwise, you won't be able to use the knowledge. And yeah, we'll talk about the cases that only automation can cover. It's really hard to deal with manual cases. And we'll talk about what's automatable, what is not automatable. And we'll review some real-life setup examples and continuous integration, like how this looks and fits in the big picture of process nowadays. And we'll also learn about how to define this knowledge at the interview, like what questions being asked. And we're going through these questions at different stages, and we'll use it as your homework and repeat at the beginning of next lessons. Make sense? So anything you specifically expect from this list? Anything you kind of else would like to get covered? Because we can adjust some course, and if you have specific topic or technology, we can also look into this. Just think about it as we go. Yes, please.
No, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Could you please explain behavior-driven development, BDD?
Yeah, I'll talk about it later. So that's the concept. We'll get there. Yeah, it's the next lesson.
Sure, thanks.
Yep. So what else? Just some examples. Yeah. So we'll go through Java interview questions, and it's not going to be at the beginning. We need to play with Java and write automation scenarios. Then we'll learn about what questions, like sorting array or reversion string. And at that point, it won't be as hard as when we start with it. And we're going to use some practice skills, because we're not going to give you much theory as we go. We're going to give you theory that helps you to actually get started. And then we try to apply as much practice as possible, especially as we move forward with this. And you'll understand the theory once you have more practice as well, from that perspective. And some examples here, like logging of automation, test context of automation, how do you use it? Some people who already played probably know about some of this. Like how do you use the test data for automation? Because you know the data you would run manually. How does it apply into automation scenario day to day? And then I mentioned about headless driver tests, like basically run the browser, Firefox or Chrome, and it's not even showing up on the screen. So that's, we also have resume bullets for you. I'm not going to deep dive into those, but basically we would expect you to put some of the information and put in your resumes, and so you'll be able to defend those points. What's really important is to put in your resume something you can defend, and you should be able to defend everything. If you're struggling with something, please come forward and ask me, and I'll give you some examples of good practices there. Normally, ideal approach in the interview, at any point, if somebody asks you, is to first just give memorized answer about technology, and then give some real examples. So you can say like, Cucumber is behavior-driven development framework, blah, 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 and then you say, okay, I used this in this kind of project. We've been automating, let's say, Macy's.com project, and I was working on those scenarios, and it's great. So you can reuse it and so on. So it's good to give some example from how did you use this technology. That's why it's important to put this on your resume, and you can give examples. Okay, but you start with the memorized definition. And it's better if you don't know the answer. It's better to say, okay, I don't know this exactly, but here's what I know. So don't say this, I don't know this. But good to provide extent you know this or somehow connected to it. Okay, and sometimes it's really important when people start an open up interview, like tell me about yourself. You start kind of putting some seeds about like something you worked with, and then person would ask you later questions from that area that you presented. Because sometimes people who interview you, most of the people I think even, they don't really prepare much, and they just taken from like their workplace. Okay, here's talk to this person. You know, they are maybe stressed as you are, or they may not prepared. Most of the people look at your resume actually at the time they meet you, and they just put your resume and just they read it like when you talk about yourself. So it's good to drive interview yourself. So you kind of bring in some information. They, you worked at like Cucumber. Okay, maybe they didn't know about it, and say, okay, what is it about? Like, can you explain? And we'll teach you like how to explain this and how to give examples. Okay, and so that's kind of really important points to mention. And yeah, we had if people like really confident, they don't go much into details. Like I had person like asking questions, he said answer and keep silent. Ask another question, he kept silent. And I asked so many questions, and I found something he doesn't know, but he was still really good in areas we needed, so we hired him. But it's better to talk a bit more, so people ask, find less. They have less time to find some question you don't know. So better to talk about some area you have used, how this technology is being used, not just definition. So you kind of sometimes like if you have a chat, like it goes, the person interested, and then like interview finished, and they don't get to ask their questions. They just get wound up with your discussion, and that's what's important to drive interviews. That's a special skill probably you just get with practice. You either learn all the questions, and you just go to main interviews, and then how you learn, or you just explain some technology. That's why it's good to bring in like Cucumber or continuous delivery, so they ask more questions about it, and you can answer. Okay. There is still companies going through transition, so not all of them are using this. But I can give you the example, like Workday, for example, they have switched recently to Cucumber, and we don't even plan, like Lena moved to Workday, they didn't have Cucumber, and now they use it, right? They still use it, okay. So they use it just for manual tests, right? So it's like being used more and more at many companies. They try to fit it in and kind of build it together. And many companies move to Agile still, like customer success team, companies, pretty large one. They have moved to Agile, and they've even written a book like A Year of Living Dangerously about the transition and so on, so on. Some companies move everything. Some companies just start with projects. Like Oracle, I'm working in, they have not switched the whole company, but they switched some cloud portions. So cloud applications now on Agile. And that's how it starts and kind of spreading through the company. And that's the technology stack that you'll be learning is actually really nicely fits in this direction. Okay. Okay, so what else to say? I'll just give you a short demo. When you know automation, it's not only about interview, but you can also automate something that you might just be interested in, like it help you in day-to-day life. Like, and I just give you an example of this scenario, and also you can see what a cucumber scenario looks like. What's the example? So let's just take a look. So it's written in technology stack exactly as we're going to learn. And it's utilizing page object pattern. But scenario itself looks like as the following. Basically, it's just it opens Amazon page. You can see like this, given an open Amazon page. It does some search, like in this case, it searches for some collectible item. And it sets some filters. You can see like I set filter as, As filters are set to make sure we are looking for specific item, we sort the price of items found. And if we see some price that is lower than something we would like to pay, we send email to our email address that there's a found item. And we would, let's say if you find something and we don't like it, right? It's cheap, but it's something we don't really like it, not good condition. We can put exclusions of the names, like something we're not really liking here. So it would not send those items. So you can have this scenario and run it, let's say every hour. So whenever something comes up what you like, you get the mail with alert, and you might go and buy it, for example, right? That's example of cucumber scenario. That's the syntax that we're going to learn later on. And it's pretty much reading as English, right? And when you look at blue items here, that's something you can change. You can see this scenario. I set filter name and filter value. And this is exactly the same structure, so I just can use it for any filter setup. So let's run it and let's see how this works. So that's Java-based. It brings up the browser, opens Amazon, puts some information, gets some found data. Now it should set the filters here. That's how it refreshes the page. And it sets sorting price. And it looks up, okay, here's what I found. It will skip something, and it's done. So, and if I check my email address, see, I get email address of item found, and I can, formulate. So there's a link here, so I click on the link, and I get exactly that item that I was looking for. And let's say if I don't like it, I can just select and exclude it. Next time it would not send it to me. And this scenario can run, let's say, as much as we want and send us some information that we would like. That's just example how the automation can be used even for like day-to-day cases. And that's exactly how scenario looks when you write it at work. Yes?
So how tough is the transition from scenario language, which is Gherkin method, to the code behind this scenario, is the Java code which actually executes it?
How fast is transition, right?
How easy or how difficult it is for an average manual tester to get into that part?
So if we start with the simple cases, because it depends how complicated you want to be, we don't want to get complicated to learn this. I would say probably in the lesson 4, we're going to write our WebDriver scenarios behind the steps here. So the plan is that next lesson, we're going to set up framework, exactly as you see here. And we're going to write some of this layer. That's already having the code for it. We're going to just reuse it. We're going to get comfortable with it. And as long as we get comfortable on the 3rd lesson and the 4th, depends on our progress, we're going to write the code behind it. We're going to create our own steps like you can see here. So it would it would have more functionality on Amazon, or it would have some functionality on any site you would like, including your own site. And maybe add more functionality here. So I would say if you talk about 3rd lesson that we will start looking into this, we are talking about like a 12-hour journey. Any questions? Yes?
Can we use exclusions only in them conditions, or we can apply them to...
Of course. So question is, can we use exclusions on any other conditions?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a format for Gherkin language, exactly as you see. So we'll talk about it in the next lesson in the detail. But you can see that's basically telling about what the scenario doing is right here. So given, when, then. That's keywords of Gherkin language that explain what the step is about. And then you can put this kind of functionality, exclusion or addition, up to you, behind any step. So Cucumber comes with the steps. It forms a scenario from the steps. And those steps are like, it's like bullet points. It's similar as you would write manual cases. And it's actually a good discipline. Because sometimes people write test cases, and probably that's why Workday switched to that framework, because sometimes people write test cases that are really hard to understand, especially for newcomers. Probably you know that, right? When you join the company, you have no idea about this. And this discipline is better, like, because it should be up to the point what scenario should be about. So when we have more examples, you'll understand better about it. But yeah, so that's you can see blue. It's something that you have changed. You can change to anything and reuse it. That's the benefit of it. It's like a function that can be reused, and like you can change the dollar amount here. You can change the email address. You can put these exclusions anywhere, or more details in any step. Okay, but this is not used too much. It's just example for you. Mostly, I'll be focusing on steps like this. And the code behind it's not as complicated as you would find out later. And you can see, by the way, it has this nice kind of summary when you run it. And that's, by the way, IntelliJ IDEA right here. And after scenario execution, it would create, for free, a report for you. So you can actually open that report and just see exactly what was scenario about. So pretty much like all the steps are green. If they have any bugs, they will be highlighted in red if they fail, and it will explain why it failed and so on. So like if I make it fail for like on purpose, like I go and break something. Give me 1 second. So when I go and break this scenario, let's say I change the XPath, sorry, reconnect. If I change this XPath, it's not going to be working. Let's take a look at how it's going to behave. See, like it fails. And in case of failure, if I look at the report that's generated, let me open this. It's pretty much gives you information why it failed. So this is, see, like it started fine in green. It failed here. It gave me some information about the failure, which we'll learn how to read it later. And it even attached a screenshot of the place it failed. Okay, so you can look at the screenshot, and you can kind of collapse this part and just copy paste and put in bug report the whole scenario. So that's the main benefit of Cucumber. This scenario is really convertible to your bug report and or your test case, and vice versa. Make sense? So basically here, you see, like it says, element is not clickable. It couldn't find this element because I changed XPath, so it's not there. Okay? And that's much information. You don't need to go much, but mostly on the top, there's all information about why it happened. Now let's start our journey, and we're going to have some practice. And so how do we start the practice? Where to start from? There is an automation scenario that we need to be able to write. It all starts with being able to understand elements we interact with. So we're going to learn about web automation. So in web automation, what's the structure of the page in the browser? What it consists of? It's HTML. So we need to understand and learn how to find addresses of those elements, how to deal with those elements. right? So before we actually interact with them, we need to know what element to interact to. So that's something we need to learn. As I mentioned, HTML knowledge is nice to have. The more you know, the better. But if you don't yet really comfortable, that's okay. We're going to go through it together. I expect that you have interacted with the web applications, maybe use some dev tools to get some extra information for the bug filing and so on. If not, we'll learn about it together. But web automation is pretty much about HTML automation. So no matter, like we have so many contemporary fancy frameworks like React, AngularJS, jQuery, everything else. It all comes down in the browser as HTML. So all browsers consume HTML. So that's pretty much the product we're going to work with, no matter what framework it is based on. So we don't care the framework. We just need to know how to deal with HTML result of that framework. And we'll learn about this. So pretty much HTML here is the building blocks for almost any web page you see when you surf the internet. And once you understand the concept of this, it's really easy to go forward and understand like web services or mobile automation, which is really similar, and so on. So to get started, let's take a look at a really simple, basic form here. It's actually, by the way, it's addressed on the page. You don't need to open it for now. You'll open it when we get started with the practice. So this is really simple form, right? So like it has some header. It has what? What is here? Input fields. What is this? It's a button. Is there anything here? Probably this. We'll look at it. That's pretty basic page, really simple one, no style. But that's the HTML code for that page. That's how it looks like from HTML perspective. So all HTML pages, it's important to know, they consist of basically blocks, right? Blocks of blocks of blocks. And the major block, major two blocks that all HTML page can consist of, you see, like first of all it goes into HTML, top and bottom. So that's called opening tag, and that's called closing tag, the slash HTML that explains, okay, this is HTML. And then all HTML pages consist of the head and the body. That's it. See, like all of it structure is similar. Head, opening tag, closing tag, opening tag, closing tag. And eventually all of those elements, it's called element. An element is about opening tag and closing tag, so, and also contents that element. So the basic structure of HTML element is a start tag or opening tag, the contents, whatever is inside, and end tag. And contents not always a text. So sometimes contents of body, for example, is all other tags in it. Okay, so that's still an element. It just contains other elements. That's important to understand. But as the basic block is basically looks like this. So that's important to understand this structure because you need to know how to address it to use for automation purposes. Okay. So again, start tag, contents, end tag. Anything to add, Lina?
About attributes,
Yeah, attributes is the next one. Yeah, so that's what we'll go. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes there's no contents of elements. So you might find, like in this case, who knows what this means? Break. Yeah, and we have two breaks. That's why we have some white space under the fields. So sometimes you can see, like, since they don't have any contents, empty elements, they have just slash. See, like there's no like opening close. It's actually two elements here. There is no like here open close. They look like this. Sometimes you don't have slash. You just have like br and close them. It's kind of allowed both ways. And there's different specifications of HTML that really strict about this, and it says, okay, must have slash at the end if it's empty tag. And it's specific specs, but browsers are about allowing. So browser doesn't want to say error, right? If there's any syntax error. And you should expect as automation engineers that people do make mistakes, not only like bugs in application, but sometimes they break the structure of HTML element. But it's not actually introducing any bug, maybe. So browsers wants to allow more options. But pretty much most of the browsers allow with slash or without slash. They say, okay, write as you wish. Okay. So you can expect multiple approaches. That's the goal of browser. Make sure it displays you nicely the contents of page, even that's some minor mistakes present. Now, as Lina mentioned, talking about attributes. See, like all attributes of HTML, they're always in opening tag. They cannot be in closing tag. Always at the beginning. And they follow the same pattern. So in this case, we have attribute name, tag attribute name, and attribute value. So what's the value here? Yeah, it's a header. Yeah. So tag attribute is ID, and attribute value is header. That's the value. And see, it's normally taken in double quotes in HTML. So what other attributes you can see on the page? Here.
First, last.
Yeah, name, attribute name. That's the name of attribute, it's attribute name. And attribute placeholder. So if you have multiple attributes, which is most of the cases are having multiple attributes, it will be like stuck up like here. Sometimes really super long, right, like that. Especially styles, like you can find a lot of data. But most, like if you're looking at the form, most of attributes, like input, they'll have name. And we'll talk about it later, how to find this one. But you can see like attribute, just one attribute, in this case it's two attributes. So let's take a look at this comparison here. So yeah, by the way, head itself, it normally contains some metadata of the page. So head is always about something like encoding of the page. Like in this case, you say, okay, it's charset is UTF-8. It may be about like some meta information, like search engines find this page and scan them, like so they know how to find your page. And we don't care much. The attribute actually we are sometimes need to verify is the title. And it's just written like title, opening tag, contains it as a text and closing. And it's actually reflected on the tab here. That's basically this information goes in here. The rest of the page that we'll be working with, that's a visible part of it, it's called body. So whatever inside the body, that's actually what you interact as a user and you see on the screen. And so header H3, basically it's a header size 3, right, H3. And it's at the top of the page here. I have some inputs, first and last. And we have some white space, which is 2 breaks here. That's exactly making this one. And of course we have a button that will submit this form. That's really simple interaction here and a simple structure. So do you need to know like all the tags, what they mean, what they are about? Of course it's really great if you know, but you don't supposed to remember all of them, right? Especially nowadays, like we have HTML5 and we have so many different attributes. It's mostly a matter of how to find, what steps should you take to find address of that element. And we don't care much, is it H3, is it input, or whatever else it might be. So you just need to know the structure, and we need to know how to actually find address to it. Okay? And you can, as you more and more work with HTML, you learn more about the tags and how they're structured. Any questions? So again, we'll be going through some HTML cases more, but there's really nice summary you can look up. It's w3schools.com, HTML. Has nice overview of all the tags. So it's for your reference, you can look at it and learn and even create your own simple HTML. So mostly what we're going to learn and focus on is how do you interact with those elements? How do you find address, right? So you can actually access those elements and do something, click or verify the data. And so we need to basically find address of that element. And we need to find, like, there are many options available through WebDriver. But based on our experience, so what sometimes we find out that at the interview, like people who know like basics of WebDriver even, they're really struggling with real interview questions. And because at interview questions, it's really easy to check, does person have real experience of automation or just like basic understanding, which you can learn like on the internet. And people given some real life examples, and you're unable to actually deal with those examples using ID or sometimes you cannot even deal with them like using CSS, or you cannot deal with them with some basic approach like by name. There's simply none of those. And sadly, a lot of elements in real life, what you will be working with, they would not have ID or name. So that's unfortunate. So and that's why we're thinking, okay, what exactly we should learn, because there's so many locators and approaches to deal with elements. So what we decided is basically go and learn with XPath. That's pretty much the most universal way of, again, it's not ideal. Ideally, if you know multiple and use them all together. But if I say if you focus on one, and especially for beginner, I would say XPath, because that's pretty much everything you need to know. So it's basically XPath is a syntax of defining parts of HTML document. So XPath is basically path expressions to select those elements. And you can think about XPath as a filter. So if there's a page, you apply the filter and you see something you search for. Like you search something and it highlights what you search for. And so even if the element has ID or name, you still go with XPath. It's pretty same template that you're going to use and you're going to learn together. That will actually set you up to be successful at the interview and deal with more complicated cases, which you'll deal basically every day as an automation engineer. Okay, so you're going to focus on that one. And when we talk about XPath, let's review some examples, and we have some practice about it. So that's XPath example. So how do you read it? So that's XPath you would write. That would select this portion of the page in our example. So you would go, okay, so how does it work? So you start with slash here, and you just go from top to bottom. So you say HTML, okay, I select HTML page, then next one, I need actually here, go here. Okay, so I have body, so I go next to this body, because body is it's a child of HTML. So body is part of HTML element, it contains body, so that's why I say slash. And it's like you go navigating to your file on your drive, disk on computer, it's exactly the same. So you go here again, next I go to div, right? And then I go to form. Eventually that's my XPath to get here. But like it's really, like it's not really effective, right? So you write a lot of code for it. It's a lot of information. And who can tell why it's also not really effective? It's really long. What else? Yeah, well, okay, so that's, I would say it's the main bottleneck actually in automation. It's not the programming language, it's actually browser. When it opens the page, you'll find it out. Like, it's open many pages, the page to load takes time. That's the main bottleneck. So you don't worry much about like performance in automation. Okay, so the problem is that tomorrow I might go and say, okay, I want to change the page and add something to it, right? New functionality. And this will break this XPath because I have one more element here. It'd still be looking same maybe, but HTML structure changes. So like defining some kind of long XPath is really fragile. It's easy to break. We don't want our XPath to expire tomorrow. We want it to work a long time, right? So that's why you normally go with relative XPath. So what's relative XPath? It starts with double slash. You can see one slash means start from the root, means HTML. Double slash means search anywhere on the page. So in this case, we only have one form. That's why it's only one found. If it was more, then it would have found more items. In our case, this would suffice. So it will find form element. It's pretty much more effective than this one because it serves the need. And if I have some more elements, it will still working fine.
So first one we call absolute XPath, and this is relative XPath.
Yes.
We have the version of that. We'll talk about this.
Exactly. Which is it comes here. So yeah, it's like I think it's a real example actually on the millionaire. So the question is, what's the difference between slash and double slash and XPath? So people ask this question.
So double slash, it's search anywhere and
yeah. So basically, this is absolute. So this is a start of absolute XPath. This is start of relative XPath. So you basically need to learn, always start your XPath with double slash. It's relative XPath, that's the way to go. Especially, this is a super simple page, and even in this case, it's pretty long. The real page is having much more. Sure.
You can find any elements, if, for instance, when you go deeper and want to find header,
Mhm.
can find it to just...
Yes, you can just. So question is, if you want to go deeper, how do you write? Yeah, we'll practice with it. But in this case, you just say / h3. It will just highlight this header h3. I'll give you examples. Okay, and of course you can do absolute. You can say form / h3. It would have select this h3. But you want to go with double slash and provide minimal information. Yes.
If we have, for instance, multiply h3 headers.
Yes, that's what I'll tell you how to deal with this. That's the real life example that we'll look at more complicated pages. I'll talk about it. So yeah, absolute XPath is basically uses complete path from the root to the desired element, starts with slash. Right, so starting from the top of the document. So DOM, document object model, DOM, you can find it. It's basically an HTML document. Simple, okay, so it's the same thing. And that's what you have example. And relative XPath starts with double slash and just says search anywhere on the page and to find something. Right, so relative XPaths are preferred. You should always use, just get the automatic double slash and then you write your XPath. That's it. So one more question that's often asked. So what's actually the advantage of XPath if you compare with CSS? Why not use CSS locators? Who can tell? So sometimes that's something that's also pretty effective, right? CSS is also, it's actually faster than XPath, but it has major disadvantage. Again, speed is not important at this level in automation. But main advantage of CSS, of XPath over CSS is it can select element by text. CSS cannot do it. So CSS is cascading style sheet, and the main purpose of CSS is the styling of HTML. It's used by web developers to define the style for certain elements. And that's why it doesn't make sense to base style on the text value, right? Especially in multi-language web application that most of them are. So that's why there's no need for text in CSS. That's why there's none syntax. But XPath is purpose XPath, selecting elements. That's why you can easily select by text. And in automation, it's really important sometimes to go this route. Sometimes there's just no other way. But that's not ideal way to go by text. But sometimes you create data, and then you deal with that data. So you create your test data as a manual engineer, and then you verify this data, right? So same way you would create data in automation, and you remember what's the name of it, you record it, and then you'll find it by name. And basically, name will be text that you'll use in XPath. So that's a major advantage of XPath, and we want to teach you some universal way. That's why we go with XPath as a tool for us. Make sense? Any other questions? So let's take a look. So as was rightly mentioned, like what if there's a 3 headers, right? So if you just say / head h3, it will select all 3, and we need a specific one. Well, in this case, it's just one, right? But let's take a look. So what if you do input? That's exactly what happens, right? 2 elements. It doesn't care like is it one element found or many or none. It's so how would you go with this approach if you wanna just let's say first one?
Square brackets.
Okay, you can say like okay, like there's some syntax that you can say okay, give me first element. That's one way. But let's say tomorrow I put I don't know like based on some country the last name will be here and then the first name here, which is like true for some countries, and that's not going to work. So ideally, if you go and deal with XPath selection by attributes. So in this example, so what do you think you would use here?
First.
Yeah, you can use like first. So name for syntax for it is the following. So see like you just put / tag name, or you can put in square brackets. That's always memorized. If you go by attribute, or you provide some extra criteria on element, you go by square bracket. So you just always open square bracket, close square bracket. Okay? And inside of square brackets, you put some extra filter definition for your XPath. In our case, so why do we have at? What do you think? What does at mean? Feel like at? It means simple attribute. So it's an attribute. That's why I say at name. That's the way to say it. Because there's other way. In this case, we have attribute name, and the value is first. So if I put double quotes here, do you think it will work with double quotes? Yeah. It would work. Yeah, it doesn't care. Like same as HTML, but it's always good to get used to single quotes, because so this is address that will be put into Java, and some of you know Java strings are based on double quotes. Java strings does not accept single quotes. So we have single quotes here. Inside of string, it's nicely will be applied. If I use double quotes here, then you have to escape them because double quotes inside of double quotes will confuse the language. So better to get used to single quotes in XPath. So just remember, name convention here, it's not breaking it, but it's better to use single quotes to not have problems later. Okay, so we'll be always using single quotes for our XPath criteria. Make sense? Okay, so yeah, if you just need second one, so how they go, just use last as a value. All changes is just the value here. Okay, and the way I write it, again, you can, well, once you have knowledge, you can write the way you want. But when you're learning, I recommend just, okay, I need this input, right? So / input, that's my tag name. And then you just open, close square bracket. And inside, you'll put your criteria. And then you just say, okay, I need attribute, say at. And then, so in this case, if I put placeholder, which is second option, this is also workable XPath. It just says, give me tag name input that has placeholder. I don't need to say what it equals to. I just say it just has placeholder. Okay. So in this case, it still select 2 elements. And then if I want extra data, I say equals, and in 2 single quotes, I provide details in this case. Okay. And so in this case, I provided input last name, which is the value of placeholder here. That's why it's selected second input. Make sense?
Or maybe we can put number 2 to select.
Of course, you can do number 2, but number 2, as I mentioned, it's not reliable. So a major focus for us would be, and we'll learn about it later, is reliability of XPath. That's the reason we use like attributes and because you should always think when you write XPath that, okay, it's going to survive like next month or 2 months. Eventually it will be broken maybe, right? That's why in automation there is always some maintenance scenarios that now not working anymore. And most likely you just need to correct XPath for them. So the most reliably you write XPath, less scenarios you'll have to correct over time. And team always, like automation team, has some people who maintain, or they have some kind of like on-call person who maintains scenarios, basically looking through scenarios broken and fixing them by mostly correcting XPaths. And that's actually a nice, I mean, people don't like this, like go through existing scenarios. And actually a good opportunity for you because that's a good starter position, right? Initially person joins, needs to learn, and you just simply maintain the framework like by fixing some scenarios. And all you need to know is XPath, how to write it. We'll have some practice, you'll get more comfortable. Especially there are some tools which are allowing really easy access and writing there. Okay? Any other questions? And by the way, when I go through XPath, it's an important point to keep in mind. I have always options, right, to provide criteria. So whenever you have option, you always go with ID as the first option. That's the most reliable. But ID of element is by default must be unique. Sometimes it's not, by the way, but most likely it is unique. It's supposed to be. People make mistakes, so there are multiple IDs, but still, it rarely happens. So you go by ID, that's the most reliable option. If there's no ID, then what would you go with? Name. Yeah, that's the second option. So name. And I'll talk about like third one and other options. So just keep in mind for now, focus on ID. If there's ID, then there's no ID, go by name. That's two most reliable options for selecting HTML elements. Okay. All right, so let's have some practice. So we have some a little bit of information, and we need to go and do some practice. So what we're going to do, we're going to work with 2 pages. So the form you have seen is called basic form. So there's you can open this URL in your browsers. So we would like to use Chrome as a tool for expat work. There is multiple tools available, and the problem is that for Firefox, Firebug used to be the most popular, Firebug. But at some point they have updated Firefox, and it broke Firebug. It's not working anymore. They promised to fix it over a number of times, and it was never fixed. And now they say, actually, we're not going to have Firebug at all anymore. Okay, so Firebug is resting in peace. And the problem for new Firefox, it does not support expat selection inside. They again promised to add this feature, but they keep promising for last, I think now 1 year. So probably we don't know when it's going to happen. But in the meantime, there's other tools appeared, and one of the recent tools is great, actually alternative. It's under Chrome browser. So we're going to work with Chrome browser, and we're going to use specific plugin called ChroPath. Okay, we're going to help you to install it. It should be on your local machines. So if you don't have Chrome yet, please download it. Chrome is one of the most popular browsers nowadays, and like based on cloud application statistics, it's on the top of the list. It's also a really good browser to use in automation. It's one of the most reliable browsers. It's pretty fast. So Firefox, due to data transformation, also not really reliable in automation at this point. It's working, but not as good as Chrome. So we will be using Chrome also in our automation as a main browser. That's why you need Chrome if you don't have it yet. Okay, just use the latest. And you can open this page, basic form. So it's Skryabin.com. You can see syntax here. It's also on the board. /webdriver/html/basic_form. And you can also, for now, open. It will be needed later. Sample.html. Same URL. You can just open second tab. The sample.html. Okay. Again, I'll attach slides for you so you can review them at the end of the class and take a look. It will contain homework. So it also contains how, if you want to use old Firebug, there is some instruction. You just need old Firefox. But we'll be focusing on Chrome as we want to be secure and we want to use the latest browser. By the way, Chrome was, I think, Chromium was never broken by hackathons. People sometimes set up some hackathons to say, okay, let's break this. I think Chrome has never been broken yet. So it's one of the most secure browsers. So that's also a good one to use. Okay. So, all right. So let's. So is there anybody having missing Chrome? Let me ask this question. Is anybody missing Chrome here? Raise your hand. We'll help. Basically, go ahead and install it. And we're going to help you to install plugin. Anybody needs the screen yet, or you all put it? Okay, one person. Just /webdriver/html basic form HTML.
Can you set up this extension?
Yeah, well, I'll show you here. I think we're not started yet on this. Are you good to move on?
No, it's for test results.
Okay, are you good, right? Somebody else needs time?
No.
Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you. So you need to basically either type it in Chrome search bar, or you search in Google. Just say ChroPath, ChroPath, path, ChroPath. It's on top, and it will find out as extension. So if you do it, let's say here, so I just say google.com, and I just say ChroPath. See, like it's on the top. It's Chrome Web Store. So if you click on it, you'll see the button Add to Chrome. Okay? Just click on it, so I already have it. If you need help, raise your hand. Lina will help you. So after you added extension, you have to restart Chrome. So you have to close it and open again, so it will get initialized. So you should see this symbol on top right. I have a lot of extensions here, but you would see this, like bluish, like X, blue dark, and it actually tells you what to do. After adding Chrome path, restart Chrome browser, open DevTools. So we'll go next one, but you just need to get to the step, install it, and restart Chrome. Is anybody not there yet?
It's still downloading.
Okay. So once you once it downloads, just open this page, which is basic form.html. So you should see this form. So yeah, so we're gonna start playing a little bit with this basic form, and then we'll move on to the next page, which you practice XPath selectors. So you need to know XPath really well, because it is a basic method of accessing an element. So it's like if you're waking up at night, you should be able to write XPath expressions. Although there's tools, like this tool is really kind of makes you lazy, and we actually were thinking, okay, should we start with like using these built-in tools? So let's see how we go, because it basically writes XPath for you. But you'll just need to adopt it and change it. And if there's a tool like this, so let's use it. Let's get used to this formation, okay? And we'll learn how to change it to the right format. So most likely, if you use this tool, you'll have to just change XPath to the most nice way, more reliable way. But it'll give you a head start, which is good, right? So we don't want to look for harder ways if there's easy way. So normally, that's the way automation engineer works. So we just open the page. Let's say I want to automate this form. I just open the page, and if I need to interact with this element, I would have to find its address, and then use that address in my code. Okay. So is somebody still installing it, or you guys good? If somebody is still in progress, please raise your hand. Are we good? Okay. So once you're on this page, if I need this element, what I do is I open DevTools. And that's something actually you might be asked in the interview, like how you worked, and you can something explain and tell a story, right? Because that's a must have knowledge working with some DevTools. All browsers have it at some extent. I think Chrome has one of the most useful, reliable for development. It used to be far back, to be honest. It's more kind of user-friendly, but Chrome is also pretty nice, and it's used a lot. I think web developers know it pretty well. So how do you open it? Make sure you restart the browser after you install the extension. That's the first step. Otherwise, you won't see it. But to access that Chrome path, you have to start with opening DevTools, which built in Chrome. Okay. I think somebody might need help. So you right-click on, let's say in our case, first name, and you go with select inspect. So you right-click on needed element. It can be anything. In our case, this is the field, and I select inspect. Right? And I just click on it, and it opens up DevTools. So by default, it goes down. I think it may be separated, or it may be on the bottom. So you can actually control it, like see, like these three dots. If you click on it, you can decide, like, if I click this one, it will be on the right side. Or it can be, see, like two windows separate. Well, I prefer if it's on the bottom. It gives some space, so if it's by default, then I would leave it that way. Okay? And by default, once you open it, see, I highlighted, I right-clicked first name, so it highlighted this HTML for me as I first opened it up, because that's what I clicked on. So as you can see, this is our HTML of the page, the one we looked at before on the slides. So that's exactly structure. that, see, if you use right click and let's say view page source, right, that also built in all browsers, it's not going to be real, actually in this case it's blank HTML, that's okay. But if you look at real, like Amazon.com or eBay or like USPS, you won't see actual HTML, you'll see like JavaScript most likely. But if you inspect element, that's HTML you'll see. That's what all JavaScript converts into eventually. Okay? So that's your place to work and get started. Make sense? So now, how do we actually access CropPath? So you can see on the right, see like there's a also window on the right. It says styles, computed, event listeners, and so on. So if you click on these two arrows, the kind of first step, see like you should see CropPath at the last one. So that's the way you access it. You click on it, and you get it right there. So that's pretty much your basic work status. So you have the page, you have some HTML here that you can observe, and you can have the tool to write XPath for it. Okay. So let's try some XPath that we have done. So if somebody needs help at some point, please raise your hand. We'll help you. So what I would like to do is to write some XPath here. Let me see. So I'll make it more larger so you can see it. Okay. Is it good? All right. So, okay, so I have this HTML. See, like I basically see it on the left, and I just, of course, I'll show you in the next moment how it writes it for you. But let's try a couple of things ourselves, okay? So you start with double slash. See, it actually, when it's red, it says, okay, I don't have information, or it's a syntax error. That's the get started. By the way, if you click on this guy, see, like it has CSS option also. It has absolute XPath and relative. So we always go with relative. That's our standard position. Just don't touch it, don't change it, okay? So if you go with double slash, that's initial point. And then what element do you want to select? What's that? Button? Okay. So just simply say button. That's the name of the tag, right? Right here. See, by the way, if you put mouse over an HTML, it highlights the actual screen. So you can see this element refers to the button on the screen. And then, so how do you actually validate this? You hit enter. So once you are done, just hit enter, and it actually highlights it for you. See, like it found it on the HTML. So it said one match node found, and it actually highlights this HTML portion at the bottom. So all you need to know is that when you select it and hit enter, it gets highlighted, and there's only one node found. So sometimes in automation you would like to find multiple, but that's a rare case. It's not often used. Majority of cases you just select one element. Again, there's some cases that you have multiple, and we'll go over them later. We're going to start with simple one element selection. That's most of the cases. Okay? Make sense? So that's why you want to write XPath that selects only one element, not many. All right. So simply, let's say if I had a wrong XPath, it may be still element with this, some random name, custom element. Simply not found in this case. So let's try something else. Let's say input. Just say input. And again, hit enter. There's two found. And I want to have more criteria, right? As you remember. So which one do you want to use? There's two options. Name and a placeholder. Name, yeah, let's go with always simple, and that's why name is on top of our list. There is no ID here, so let's go with name. So how do you do? You just first open square bracket and close. Make sure you have this two open and close, okay? Inside, just put pointer inside. That's where you write your extra attribute criteria. So how do we go with attributes? We just do what? Yeah, yeah. Say at name. Yeah, equals. Okay. Two single quotes, right? Yeah. You can have two single quotes. I mean, input inside, but if you want, I prefer this way because that's way I don't forget. Like, because I must close it. If you write, you have a long X path that sometimes you use this. Okay, so I kind of do again opening close single quote, and I put like in this case first. Okay, and just hit enter, and I select only one. In this case, see only one node right here and highlight on the screen. Okay. So how do I do now? How do I proceed if I'm an automation engineer? I need this element. I just copy this spot in my code, which we'll do later once we start writing automation scenarios. Next lesson, actually. Okay. It is case sensitive. So question is it case sensitive or not? It is case sensitive. So I'll talk about situations when you have to provide partial match. But keep in mind, it's always case sensitive. Okay. So if you put, let's say, capital F here, then it would not work. First, not going to work. Okay. Again, if I need to change it and want to use the last name, all I have to do is just see if I double click on this, it will select my value. And I just put last, and it selects second one. So that's simple kind of change of story. Make sense? So that's pretty much it for this one. So say if I want to breaks for some reason, I do /br. And in this case, see, it doesn't highlight anything because there's nothing to highlight, but it says true nodes found because that's what we have right below our fields here, okay? All right, so let's move on to next page, and we'll have some labs on it. Can you please pass one each? So let's open sample HTML, just sample.html. That's more or less real page. It's still, we keep it simple. So I have created this page on purpose as a kind of for practice purposes. So while it's simple, it also has pretty much all types of elements that you will encounter as automation engineer. And it also has like, although not visible, but it has iframes on it, one iframe. It has a new window opening. It has some alerts that build on JavaScript. Different types of fields, including file attachments that sometimes you have to deal as an engineer, and like multi-select, single selects, and so on. It is also a responsive page. So what does responsive mean? Responsive user interface.
It's for mobile, for desktop versions.
Yeah, we have a UI developer here, so here's the guy to ask questions on the UI. So responsive design means it's basically now it's a standard, I think, for all web applications. Responsive design is it's something that makes application look nice on all devices there. So here's the way it looks on desktop. But imagine if you open it on the phone, it will be really small, right?
Can we test?
Yeah,
also.
Of course. Yeah, I'll tell you how to test it. You can test it through automation also. So let's say I wanna. So if I open it on tablet, right? Dimension is just not as wide. See, like it changes its shape, and that's the way it looks on tablet. It just looks still nice. And if I open it on the phone, like it also changes. So it just you can scroll from top to bottom. So it like becomes now one column based. So and by the way, look, sometimes it happens. So on application data, see it has like our location, it has date. Today, right? It has time, and it's not needed on the phone. So we're really fighting for real estate on the phone. So we simply just don't display it. It's not as important on the phone because we want to make sure person doesn't have too much information and starts filling out data. Make sense? So basically, that's something we might also test on this page as we automate it. And then finally, like if I try to see, like there's some fields that have what? Red asterisk. And those fields are basically required fields. So if I let's see, fill out my data, so if I open, so like a password, confirm password, disabled by default, and sometimes you want to verify also this. And once you type password, now you have to put the password, right? If I try to submit now, it does not allow me. It says field is required. And if I start typing in, it tells me that requirement is at least 5 characters for password. And if I input enough, then since it doesn't match, it tells me right away. See, like that, it's based on jQuery validation. I think it's a standard for web applications. Do not wait until you submit and tell error right away. So that's a simple form, but it has kind of many functionalities. So name here, if you click on it, actually it opens a dialog. And so this dialog is called a model. You may find this term on automation. And model means that once it's opened, you cannot interact with the rest of the page. It's called model dialog. Dialog is basically some piece of it. So in my case, I just put some data. I save it. It basically saves my name. So I can also verify, right, that the name I put is correctly formed into first and last with space or middle and so on. And then finally, like it doesn't allow me until I accept agreement. I might leave other fields not required ones. I leave them as they are. And when I submit it, basically goes to the next screen and confirms the data. I want to correct something, I can get back and correct it, and then I submit again. So that's kind of the basic page that gets some result, which you might want to verify. And some verification points, not necessarily like data I have entered and processed, but also like see, it doesn't show my password because I don't want to display it on the screen, and so on. Make sense? So again, if I look at this page, I think it's kind of becomes one column in mobile. Okay. So that's kind of the page here. We're going to work it, and as we go and progress, you'll find out more elements and how to deal with them. So I think let's give a couple of exercises examples with this, and we'll go to the lab, which is based on this page interaction with XPath. Okay. So I would like to now, let's say, refresh the page so it gets rid of all information saved. Okay, so how do I write XPath, let's say, for the password? So again, same process, I right click, say inspect, I open DevTools, and I have I open my CropPath. So if, by the way, on this screen, if you want to highlight some element, you can also use the pointer here. So you can click on it, and then click on whatever you want. It highlights it in your HTML right here. Okay. So see, like this is real deal, real example. It's based on, it's not pure HTML. It's based on jQuery UI, which now it's standard for web applications, and jQuery, jQuery UI, jQuery validation. But we don't care as automation engineers, as long as we know how to select elements and deal with them. And to select, we need to know XPath, right? So let's take a look at password, right? So right click on password. Again, I can also click on password, inspect. It highlights my password, or I can use the pointer and click it. So both ways work fine. Okay. I prefer always right click and inspect. That's why I make sure that it's works as expected always. So that's my password. And see, like the funny part is that it's already XPath right there. So as long as I click inspect it and I have CropPath open, it writes XPath for me. So pretty much template ready to go. And so you just need to copy it and use it. It's ideal actually. So / tag name at ID equals password. So if I let's say go and do same for username. Now username is visible here, but you see, as I mentioned, sometimes it doesn't give you ideal XPath. So this is pretty well okay, but as we remember, if there is an ID, I would go with ID. Is there ID here? No. Okay, that's fine. But next priority is what? Name. Is there a name here? Yeah, so when I talk about name, it's attribute name on the element. So attribute has name, so it says ng model. See, this structure is a bit more complicated, but it is following same pattern. So input here, see like angle bracket input, what is it? How's it called? It's a tag, what is it? Opening tag. Opening tag or start tag. And then what is it inside? Contents, yeah. And inside of this opening tag, there's what? Attributes, exactly. So we have attributes, and this is what? Again, there's many, but they have same pattern. You just need to know this pattern. So we have ng model, that's the name of attribute, and that's the value. See, and that's how it actually used it. See, it says at ng model, value is here, and which is actually pretty reliable. Is okay. What's next? Is it required? That's what makes field required. What's next? Class. So class is always about style, most cases, and it's most cases pretty long value for class because it has all these different styles combining together. Even though this page looks pretty simple, it has a lot of classes and styles built in, so it makes it responsive UI. Okay, so it adjusts to the UI. So that's why class is pretty long, and a class is not ideal option for XPath because it's based on style. However, sometimes you can go with this if there's no other option. Now we have some type, right? In here, have name equals username. That's second priority for us. If you remember, it's more preferred. It's more reliable than this one. Even that this is good, provided there's no other options. I would not go with this option if there is other applied. Okay. So how do we change it? So again, we could have written from scratch, but I think this is even easier. So we just need to adjust this one to what we need. Okay. So we already have the / input, correct? We just need to change insights so it's based on the name. Make sense? So we change this. Change what to what? Let's do it together.
Attribute name and value
Yeah.
username.
Yeah. So we have okay. So I just click here, right? And I just delete this until add. See, it's red because now it's incorrect syntax. It's evaluating. So I change it to name. So now if I hit enter, it's still valid XPath, but there is no such element with this name. So I have to change now my name value, and I change it to username, right? Say username, and I evaluate it with enter. That's my element found. So we kind of changed it to more reliable XPath pattern. And pattern is always same. See, like it always goes with /, always tag name, and inside there are some attributes. There's more complicated cases built on this, but it is always this structure as a basic structure. Okay. Any questions? So we'll just need more practice with this. So let's take a look at other example, the email. So I inspect it. It's a pretty much similar approach. It have selected something else. So how do I change this one? What do I change?
Attribute name, value.
Yeah. So the attribute, you can say a name equals email, right? So what else? Let's take a look at something else. Let's say type. Let's try to change to type. Again, I delete this one. So I leave at type, and I change type to email. So again, if I had some typo, hit enter, wouldn't find anything. So make sure you have proper spellings of email until you hit enter and it finds it. Okay. If somebody needs help, please raise your hand. So that's the way to deal with this. Pretty much same pattern for everything until you have like more complicated cases, which we'll review. Okay. Yes.
What do you use to use type instead of name?
Yeah, I would use name, just example. Of course, yeah, you're right. So if I have name, I would go with name. The first priority ID, there is no ID here, or is there?
No.
There is no ID here. So if there's, I would say if there is no name, I would go maybe with type as long as there is one email on the screen. But sometimes there may be multiple email addresses. In that case, I would pretty much go with this NG model. So that leads us to the third priority, right? The third priority, I would not say specific case. I would say some kind of custom attribute. So custom attribute is something like here, right? So again, we don't know the framework. It's based on AngularJS actually, but we don't care about it. So if you see NG model is just attribute name for us. So why do we think it's reliable? Because it says email into it, right? It says form data.email. That's why it's reliable. Type email, again, if you know HTML, it's just all email field types have type email, which can be many. And this is specific to this field. Okay? So,
basically explaining,
Mhm.
you can use any attribute.
yeah, you can use any attribute.
Just to practice.
It's your call, yeah. For now, what we're doing now is just to see how do you select those elements. And next lesson, we're going to actually use them in our framework. Okay. For now, we want to make sure we select those and we can find them. That's the first step for us. So, and once because we want to combine too many items together. Next lesson, we're going to actually write Cucumber steps, and we're going to provide XPath in those steps. So it will be driving browser for us. Okay. But before we do, we want to make sure we're comfortable with this selection, with this tool. Okay. So one step at a time. Make sense? But once you deal with the pages, you have like ID, name, some attribute as I mentioned here. Next one, I would say class probably is an option. But for class, you'll have to use more advanced XPath. I'll talk about it later a bit. Okay. And whatever else, like maybe text would be the last resort. Okay. I'll tell about text. There are some exceptions which you would use it as a first. Its exception is when you create this data yourself. And that's the only probably exception when you select by text, which still can be often case. All right? So let's take a look. So we have some labs here, and we would like to play a little bit with more material, and then we'll start the lab on that matter, okay? So that's the basic of XPath, but doesn't stop there. For XPath, there's more advanced cases, which you might follow like by not selecting exact element, but you might want to provide more criteria to element. What if there's some case that you have, say, attribute with the same name, and you have selected 3 attributes? So you still need to provide more criteria. What if you have a really long text, and you provide every single line of text, and tomorrow somebody changes text a little, it's going to break your XPath. So that's cases that you might use some advanced techniques, which we'll review, and then we'll have some lab about this. Okay. So let's give some examples. So here, as you know already, you have H3 header right on top of our form, and see, like we always provide some tag name first, but we don't need to. There is some option that we can just write star. So who knows star as meaning anything when in search? Who already knows this? Yeah. So star pretty much using here asterisk or star. It means anything. So you can write your XPath this way, which is okay. Or if you don't care about tag name, you can write it this way. So why do you think this may be a good option to go?
Because it's no more hidden.
Yeah, because we have ID. ID is by definition unique, so we don't care about tag name. So what's the benefit of this approach if it has ID? Because if tomorrow somebody says H2, now it's bigger, right? It's still going to work. This is not going to work anymore. And this is going to work. So we're going to recommend you, if you have ID or name, go with asterisk. This is still okay, especially for beginners. Okay, but we would like to get used to good name convention approach. So that's something we would advise you to go if you have ID or name. Great. So it's good to start with something that is always used. So good to have this habit. Now, like a famous text selection with XPath. So how does it go? So if I go by text, it's as simple as this. So XPath also has functions built into it. But good news that you need to know two functions for XPath. XPath is also kind of language. And it's pretty similar, as you know, to like just simple drive path expressions. And it has also built-in functions. One of the functions that actually extracts text is function text. It's right there. So if you want to select by ID, as you can see, you say @id equals value. But if there's no ID, or you want to specifically select by text, if you created this data, you would just change it to this format. This will be selection by text. See, there's no more @ here, because text is not attribute. And you can see there's parentheses here. Parentheses means it's a function. So in Java, when you call the function, you always use parentheses at the end, like here. XPath is no exception. You would go with the same approach and pattern. Make sense? So instead of @id, you just put text parentheses and equals some value inside. So that's example of using text here. So what else to mention? So sometimes when you select element, you don't need exactly this element. So you want to start with this element, but you want to select something else. So what can be the reasons for it? In this case, I might have some, let's say, fill out form element, and I might have some element next to it, just doesn't have anything reliable to it. It's maybe like 50 elements like this, okay? But this guy has ID. So I can start not from the top with my double slash, but I might start with this element and then move into other neighboring to it. So it's called the technique called anchoring. When I select anchor, and then I move from it somewhere, okay? So if you just use double slash, it means I go any place on HTML. But I can actually start with this element and then go anywhere I want, up or down. Okay. So let's take a look at example here. So when I have a username, and I already have the our XPath here, so we don't need to touch it. Okay. So that's whatever it brings in. If you have username, that's fine. But let's say I want to select this label. Okay. But I don't want to go from the top document. I just want to use this as a start point. So I need to just know a couple of things here. So that's my XPath as a starting point. And when I want to go somewhere else, I use slash. The slash means go to the next step, kind of next step here, as you would use for moving through the disk or driving your machine. Okay. So when I use slash, it means go to the next element and do it. And who can remember like what do you write if you want to go to parent folder? Dot, right? Dot. So here if I go with dot after slash and I hit enter, I simply go to the parent element. So let's try that one. So I have this my element here on, which is what? Which is a div. So if you look at this structure, it has input, which we selected initially, and on top of it, it has label, right? And they both children of what? Children of div, here, like here. So I can select one element, and then just say slash dot dot, which will bring me to the parent, which is div in this case. So you can see it found div. Now I have moved up. So how do I go now to label? Just want to go to label.
One more slash.
Yeah, slash, and I just said what? Yeah, okay, I can go to dots. This I'll move to actually parent, but I want to go down to label. See, after slash I can go either way. So when I do slash, I say, okay, go next somewhere. Okay. Yeah, I just put type label. Okay. So I just say label, and I hit enter, and that's how I select my label here. You see, in this concept, we started with this guy with initial input, and then we went from it to label to the next state. Okay. So the way we did, we just went to the parent, and then we moved down. So that's sometimes this technique is the only way to select certain elements, and we'll review some live examples that when you have to go with that one. Okay. So this technique is used when label doesn't have anything, and there is a bunch of labels on the page, and that's why you want to label next to this element. So you start with it, go to some element that contains both, and then go just to that label. Make sense? So that's something that as the next option to know here. Okay. So what else to say? Yeah, so we'll have some switch here, but I think it's one more kind of point to remember is as well as you can go from element to another element, you can also give more criteria for the current element. That's also an important technique to remember, okay? So one is when you select, let's say, email, so I click email, and we have this selected. So I can go from here same way. I have slash, dot, dot, and it goes to parent, and so on, right? But if I want to provide more criteria, if this is not enough, if this is just something selected but not everything, I might provide more criteria to this element. So how do I do this? I need more. There's no slash. Slash is for moving somewhere, okay? So slash is move away either up or down, okay? So we don't do anything actually. So it's pretty simple. So we have square brackets. We just provide more square brackets. That's it.
So what
yes.
is expressed by
two attributes, exactly. So sometimes you want to go by two attributes, and if sometimes one is not enough. For example, let's give you some examples. So I have input, and I just have at required. If I give this example, there's 5 of those. See, if I say input, it has required in it, gives me 5 matches. So I need to provide more data, and in this case, I just provide one more attribute to go. So in my case, I can go at name equals email. And that's when it gives this approach. Okay.
What is the use case for that?
So use case for it if selection by one attribute not enough. So in our case, we do have name that makes it unique by itself, right? But sometimes there's no name, there's no ID, so you have to give more criteria. And you can rely on attribute selected, like some element selected, if you go by 2 attributes or even 3 attributes. Okay, so like in this example, if I have required, it doesn't select one element, but I need only one. So if I want extra data, I can provide like name equals username. And that's when it selects
So let's say
just
you
one.
need to verify that username is required. So if you just put one username,
Yes.
you will not verify it.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, so when you select by this criteria, you make sure that username is also required field. But sometimes you don't need to care about, like, you need to know what is required or not. You just provide criteria until you have what you need. It's basically when you have like some garbage in your XPath, like really long one, it's not going to work. You need to provide something more specific and more reliable, and that's something that you can go with as a position to just really long, automatic generated XPath here. Okay, so I'll give you some examples like on like eBay or Amazon when it generates like super long XPath, and you have to change it to adapt to your needs. But this is approach to go in that case. If not one is enough, you go with 2. Okay. All right, so let's have breakouts, and then we have a lab based on what we learned. So what we know so far is basic elements for XPath selection, right? And then on top of it, you can use it as an anchor and use slash. Then you can go up or down. If you want more criteria, you don't use slash, you just use one more square bracket. So that's your building block for XPath to go. Okay? And that's pretty much almost everything you need to know for XPath. Everything else is based. And frankly, majority of cases is based just on one tag selected. So whatever template we have initially, that's most likely we'll go with as automation engineers. Okay? So let's have a 15-minute break, and then we'll go with the lab based on what we learned. More. Are you all good? Okay. All right, so let's spend a couple of minutes to review what we have learned so far. So basic structure for XPath is double slash. That's just how you get started. You write tag name. In our case, it's input. And in square brackets, you write attribute. In this case, ID equals some value. Okay? You take value in the single quotes. Now, same you can write with asterisk instead of tag name if you don't care what tag is it. Sometimes it's more reliable. In our case, it's like H3. Okay. So what else can you do? So when you write down and you would like to select by text. So how do you go? Instead of using attribute name, you just use what? Text. And others is exactly. So in this case, like you have fill out form. Okay. So that's kind of approach, and that's something you use as a function. Now, in our case, if you want to go up and down, and that's more advanced technique. So if you still feel not comfortable with it, that's okay. We'll be learning more about it. Okay, next lesson also will refresh this. And that's the most advanced you can go. And that's actually some questions about this going up and down is asked on a senior position level, sometimes on a basic level. So it's not all people know it, okay? But it's really good if you know it. It will help you on the interview a lot if you get this question, okay? Or if you don't get this question, you can even ask, you can even explain and use this as a chance to show you knowledge, and it'll prove that you actually a person that has some experience in the field, because you do it once in a while, like once a week at least. So in this case, like if I want to, let's say next field, right? In our case, something that next to the original. Let's say we go with ID first, and then you want to go somewhere, so you can just do slash, and you go double dot, right? So in this case, if you select this guy, with double dot, you select what? You select what? Which is parent? In this case,
Form.
It's a form here. So parent is something containing the element. So in this case, it will be, this writing would be exactly the same as this one. That's a get started, okay? But we use this if there is many forms on the page, and we want only the one that contains this field. That's why we use this approach. But you can go in this case, let's say, and use H3. So this pretty much will be H3 only in the form that contains this field. Make sense? So that's kind of tricky way to write it down. But that's important, sometimes asked in an interview. I'll give you next lesson a specific question that is being asked. And another option, like if you use, let's say, name, in our case first, right? If you use and want to provide second attribute, you go how? Just another square bracket, and you say placeholder and whatever, right? So that's kind of what we have learned so far. Most of the cases you just get into this field, but sometimes you go, it's not often, sometimes you go this way as well, okay? Just need to know, like, one thing that we have looked at text also, right? One thing I would like to add to this list before we start the lab is sometimes the text is pretty long. So you want to go with partial match, right? Because remember, not only this can be long, but also it would contain, it should be case sensitive. So when you go by, this placeholder is a background text, pretty much. And if some of them like things change later, or like you have like not 3 dots but 1 dot, it's gonna break your XPath. We don't want to go there. That's why we go with partial match. So we select the portion that most reliable in our mind, and we go with that. So that's if you look at this text, right? Fill out form. But we don't need to provide everything. So we just say fill. And we use this change and change it to contains. So that's the approach. See, like original one is you say star, text, and some value. If I want to just partial match, what you do is basically wrapping this up in contains function. So you would still keep square brackets, and you just use contains function in it. Okay?
And it will work with any attribute, not
Right.
necessarily with text. Any
Exactly.
attribute can
Yes.
be
Yes.
documented.
So let me give you just an example. Okay, take a look at it. So let me go to basic form example. So that's your form, and I need fill out form. Again, I inspect and then click on star and select crop path. Okay, and then so I just right click inspect it. Sorry. So let's see this one. See, it creates for me some already this template. So I just change this to text, and I provide fill out form. See, it works. Selects my field. So, but see, like if I have like case change, it's not going to work anymore. So that's the main problem. So if you select by text, sometimes text is super long. So you want to go with partial match in this case. Just in this case, like select only 1 word, and it will be enough. Okay, you decide how it's going to be. So it's like you're designer of your code, and you say like, what should I select? Okay, it's up to you, pretty much. Like it's up to you what attribute you would select. That's up to you what partial match you would select. And once you start writing automation case, you'll find out better. You get more comfortable, and we'll teach you. It comes with experience, pretty much. Okay, writing reliable XPath selectors. So, so how do I change it to contains? I normally don't start with contains myself because it's a bit tricky syntax. So I write first this exact match that works, and then I just cut it down to what I need. Okay. So how do I do it? So I have this nicely working XPath as a starting point, and I just write contains inside. So like say contains, and I take this inside of. Since it is a function, and that's the good news that only 2 functions you have to know. That's second last function you have to know in XPath. So first is text, this is the second one. So contains, and I just wrap it up inside. And there's one last change I have to do is, since it's a function, you need to change this equals to what? Comma, because it's a function. So, and you have templates, right? How it's written, so just change it like this. See, now it's not red anymore, so it helps you with syntax. And if we hit enter, it's still working fine. Let's see, we basically, originally it was looking like this. So we just added contains, wrap insides down, with the function, and just changed with the comma equals. And that's it. That's our contains. So what this means is that we can now use partial match here. So if I start removing data, it still works. Make sense? So I can pretty much go, just leave fill, and it will go as nicely. So this is a pattern to use for all the cases. So once I have this, I can actually, as Lina mentioned, I can use it on attributes. So if I look at my HTML here for H3, so instead of text, what else can I use? So I have text, but it has what also? Header, right? So it has ID, so I can just, instead of text, I can say add ID, and I can put value of ID. And I can use just partial match here as well. So as long as it finds something that contains this HEA, it will find it and select it. So normally it's not used for attributes. Most cases it's used for text. But since class is often a really long one, that's a good example to use against class. Okay, that's a good example to use against class. So that's pretty much contains functions. So let's review some examples here. So we have original text equals some value, contains just wraps it around, and equals replaced with comma. And you can use also like attribute as well as an example. And here is an example we already looked at, right? So you have placeholder with some value, and you can add another one as second criteria. So you just want to add more criteria to it, you just add it in square brackets. Make sense? And that's what we looked at. So if I want to select my header, and if I want to move out from it somewhere, it's called anchoring. If you anchor this kind of first starting point, because if you use double slash, it searches across the whole HTML. And this you set a starting point. So you select this, it's pretty reliable based on ID. And then you go like double dots anywhere. And then you can, it's pretty much the same as div here. Yeah. So that's, I think, pretty much it. So double slash can be used not only at the top, but you can use them like inside of XPath expression. So double slash means what? Double slash is anywhere on the page, right? So you can also use same way, like see, like div form h3. You can say just div double slash h3 means select div and then anywhere in div find my h3 here. Okay. So let's do some practice here, and you have your labs, so you'll get better understanding when you actually play with it. Okay. So let's do this, and you have this 2 pages, which gonna be working with our sample page. So make sure you have it open. Who else needs it? Raise your hand. So there's a few tasks. I'm going to give it some time to get started. And please feel free to ask questions. Lina will help you.
Try by yourself first.
Yeah, try by yourself first. So don't worry if some of those are challenging. We'll review them. The main focus is just to practice. We're going to use pretty much same selectors next lesson. When we use it in automation, actually we use those in automation. So those skills you will use now will help you next lessons to actually use those selectors in the code. Okay. So if you're still struggling right now, it's okay. It will come better as we practice more. Number 4. So let's take a look. So number 4 says find unique XPath for option Toyota in select list car make. So we have a car make here. It's a multi-select. It's called multi-select list in HTML language. So you can see I can select multiple cases. Like if you hold Control in Windows or Command in Mac, you can select multiple cases. So we only need one for now. We want to select only one, and we want a Toyota. So same way, I can just right click and inspect, and it actually selected option with value Toyota. So that's the ideal way to approach it. But here's the thing. So if you look at your kind of instruction about XPath, it does recommend to use select as a kind of first step, right? And here's why. Because here's the only thing we say here is option and the value Toyota. What if there's another select list that also has a Toyota in it? But maybe it's something about like another example of country of origin. We can have country of origin, and we can have country of birth. So country of birth origin is good. but country of residence may be different. And if we just go by the option, it would select both of them. So that's why it's always good for selects to kind of write a bit bigger XPath. Not only the option, in this case it's good. So if you just went with this, it's good, okay? But I would recommend just expand and put select first and then option after. Because if you analyze this HTML, here's the option, and it highlights it here, right? Our option. But all options are children of what? Select. So that's our select. So it's always good to write XPath in the way that we go with select first, see / select, and you provide some data about select. So what can we provide for the select? Like it's here. Okay, name, what name? Karmic, yeah. So we go with name, so say @name, because it's attribute. And value is karmic. Again, make sure it's case sensitive. And only then we say /, so we can use / or /, and we provide option. And we hit enter, it works. So what's the benefit of this is that it will only select option that is part of this select list.
So and sometimes even option is unique, it doesn't work without select. So we recommend to use select before and then go down to the child.
Yeah, this is the way you ensure that your option is part of actual select list you want, because maybe it doesn't is unique today, but tomorrow it might be some other select list introduced with the same values in it, but different meanings. So you always think when you write XPath, like what will happen tomorrow, how reliable it's going to be. And at this point you learning syntax, so that's the main focus. As long as it works, it's good. But when you get this knowledge, then next focus would be reliability for your XPath. And that comes with just experience and practicing. That makes sense? And the next task is pretty simple, similar. It's about unique XPath for option Canada in country of origin. So it's exactly the same, yeah. So the only difference that you probably you cannot select here, right? So you would inspect this select. So it writes your XPath for the whole select. So that's the starting point, right? So see, it gave me a pretty long version of attribute, which is fine, but I can make it easier. So what I can do? What can I do for it?
It's the name.
Yeah, just change the name. Yeah. So it's good, good knowledge to have, by the way. For form, all elements must have name. That's the way when you submit. Most, not 100%, but most of the cases, say 95% plus. If you see the form, every single element that you can change or type will have name attribute. Because that's the way browser works, that it submits the form. On the back end, it gathers all these names. That's how that's how actually development code works. So that's how it knows, okay, this value belongs to this. That's why name is most likely unique with some exceptions for the forms. So you would, if you see the form, most likely it has name in it. So you look for it, okay? If it has multiple attributes, see like here's the name. So I would change this one from ng model to make it simpler and have just name at name. And value would be just country of origin without any form data. Again, I always check with enter. So it gives me a refresh and it's still one element found, okay? Okay, that's the starting point, that's a good start. But the task is to find Canada, right? So how do I do? I have select here and I can just click on it and it expands with options, right? So what I look for is Canada here. So it's right here. So again, see if I click on it, it right away changes this to option. So I want to put it back. By the way, you can see that this changes. So you can go back with Control Z if you Windows or Command Z on Mac. So just good to remember this. So if you want to go back to previous value, just hit Control Z or Command Z and it will go back the previously put value. So it have history of all the changes. Okay? And when you're going to go forward, you go with Shift Control Z or Shift Command Z. It will go forward. See, I have my history. I want to go back. See, it changed my selection to option. If I say Control Z or Command Z on Mac, I go back. I can go one step back to the version I started modifying. And I can go as much as I would like. So if I want to return back, I just now hold Shift and use same Z, and it will just go forward now. Make sense? Control Z, Control Command Z. So in my case, I would like to start with select, and then use slash. So I have in front of me my option. That's always good, like to put HTML and then you write on the right XPath. That's HTML for which you write XPath. And you just do option, and what would like you to use for filter option? Value, okay. Or let's use text just for example. Yeah. So how do you write text?
Text?
Yeah.
Text.
Yeah.
Text.
Make sure no add text, because add means attribute text, which can be the case. In our case, it's function. So just use text and what? Parenthesis, because it's function. Equals what? Canada. Whatever you like. Hit enter, it now selects Canada. The same way I can use, like if I use China, it will select China. So here's found. And that's pretty much your XPath for options. So when you deal with drop-downs, drop-down element, in most of the cases your XPath should be starting with select, and then you provide option under it. It's always child of select. So option is always part of select. Multiple options to choose from for select. Any questions on this? Yes?
But on this, can I ask a question about number 3?
Okay, okay, get back number 3, all right. Password, confirmation, all right.
So it's can find disable fields.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't find disable fields if we actually print something in this field, which makes sense. But it also didn't find this field if we print something to password.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Okay, so the page that you can see, it's dynamically changing, right? So why it finds when it's disabled. So you kind of say add disabled. See, now it finds it, right?
Yeah.
The reason it finds it because if you look at the field right here, that's our field we are looking for. It has, first of all, ID confirm password right here. Yeah. And second one, it has disabled attribute right here. Okay. And that's how initially it gets disabled, so I cannot do anything. That's an instruction for HTML. But as far as I type something in, it kind of internally removes disabled, so it's not selectable anymore. Because disabled tag gets removed from it dynamically as far as I type the data. So that's a today and nowadays that's the way HTML, I mean, modern web application work. They don't want you click some buttons to make change happen, right? They would like you to, and users are actually picky now, right? Because users want to know if there's a mistake, they want to know right away. That's why in my case, initially I should submit the form, but user experience here, once I submitted the form, I would like to change, see right away the error as I type. And you can use all this information in XPath to reflect this. So we'll have more examples, so you'll see more. Make sense? Okay. All right, so number 6. Find unique XPath for radio button female by 2 attributes. So we have radio buttons here. So what's radio button? There's 2 options, right? There's a checkbox. You can check, and if there's multiple, you can check and check multiple. Radio buttons are for only one selection. See, I click on one and second get unselected. That's radio buttons. This control right here. So I need to find XPath for female using 2 attributes. And approach is same. I inspect this. And actually, it's pretty nice to give a good example, right, by text again. But let's see. So I might not want to select by text in this case. Again, text is always last resort if there's other options, unless you created this data. In our case, we have not created this data. It's just part of the form. Okay. So
you choose a female, not radio button.
Okay. Yeah. So I choose Spain. Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. But let's just take a look at this. So I would not go with text here, unless there are some other options. Okay. But for this span, that's okay. Let's take a look at our radio button, right? So okay, let's right-click, inspect. Yeah. So that's always good to make sure. Sometimes you have to pixel hunt, right? So you know what? In this case, if you click on the text, it also works, right? But sometimes you have to click on this button itself. I would say this way, I would consider this UI bug if you have to pixel hunt and click inside. Okay, so normally if you click on label, it does selection itself. Like another example is this one. See, I don't need necessarily click here. I can just click on text. So I would say here is the same. I click on text. So from automation perspective, you might click on text and it will work in that case, just for your information, right? And if it doesn't work, I would consider it as a kind of UI experience bug. I would file this, say like user needs to hunt for radio button. But let's get to the point that we actually want to select this radio button, right? Not the text. So let's see. So I actually right-click on this guy, inspect, and here's one of the cases that it doesn't help with anything at all, right? Yeah. Because this is absolute XPath. It starts with absolute, and it has some skipping here, but it has, see, like number 3, number 1. It's always a very bad option. Unless the page is frozen and never changes, which is never the case, even for maintenance, you must choose something else. Like if you see something like this, don't use this in automation. It's a bad sign for like junior people who, and people don't, I mean, all the changes normally go to code review. I'll talk about it later. So this would not be passed by code review by your peers. Okay. So what do you change it to?
I change it to slash
Mm-hmm.
tag div.
Okay. So let's say you want to input or what? Okay.
No,
just
tag
this one.
Or div.
Input.
Div.
Okay. Div.
To slash.
All right.
Asterisk.
Uh-huh.
By value female.
Okay. So you have value here female. Okay.
Female. And one more by name, gender.
Yeah. Okay. And we say name equals gender. Yeah, this works well. The only correction, so this is pretty good XPath. The only correction I would say, we don't need div here. I mean, you can use it. Again, there is no ideal solution, but even if I remove this one, this still be pretty decent because not necessarily they are in the div. Maybe most likely this will stay this way. I think this is a reliable way, but this will be also pretty reliable approach. So you can just go see star. I don't care what is it, but I provide 2 options because if I just provide name, right? That's one of the examples. It's pretty much exception that multiple of those found if I just go with name gender. So you have to provide more data for it. Any questions? So for radio buttons, that's one of the exceptions for form that they have multiple name. Because eventually you cannot choose both. Only one will be submitted, as you can see. That's why they have duplicates, and but they have different values for it. Make sense? All right. So number 7. Any questions on number 7? So we have find unique XPath for label phone number. Then go down to the input field, having XPath you wrote for label as an anchor. So that's exactly example when we move up and down. So it says first part of it, it says find unique XPath for label phone number. So we're talking about label here, and it's right on top. Inspect it. And automatic creation looks pretty decent. Again, keep in mind, it's not a text, okay? It's not selected by, because I had a question. Phone number is a text, but it selects by attribute 4. And attribute 4 exactly is lowercase phone, okay? But what we want to do is we want to use this as an anchor and select actual input here. So, so how do we do this? Slash dot dot, okay? Slash input, okay. Yeah, that's exactly what does it. So if we just selected slash slash input, we would have found 17 options, right? But having this label as an anchor and say, we start with this label, and we go up to div, contain it, and then we go to input, but under this div, which is only one input. So that's kind of, there's another, I think I had question in the break. There's so-called expat access, such as like following sibling. But, and those are good to know in the interview, I'll talk about it later, but for now I don't want to give you too much syntax. To be honest, it's a really super rare case. And myself, I would go with this approach to select this. It's, we can debate this, but I would go with this approach. It's more reliable. Because if you use following sibling, you say, let's select, again, it's a fancy way to approach it, and it's a long, but you would select only the first element from ourself, you know, you don't go back. And sometimes attributes can change. So there's basically, my point is that there's some other more fancy approaches which we completely don't need to know. Only memorize some of those for interview questions, which we'll go over later, okay? For practical purposes, I would go with this approach to select some kind of next elements here. Okay? Make sense? All right, so what else? Yeah, let's take a look. So, what we have left here. So we have unique expat for application date, value, and label, which is pretty much automatic selection here. So let's review this. What's left? So we have this guy, right? So we have when I select this value, it goes by current date. See, like it goes by B as initial tag name, and B means bold, but we don't need to memorize it because we don't care about what it means. We just want to know, okay, I want to select this value and make sure it's today, for example, right? So it's always today, and as long as I have this selected, like it's only one found, that's all I need to know. So I say hit enter and it's selected. That's all we need to know, and I don't know what B means here. Okay. And when I select date, inspect, it's also pretty decent, like selection by text. See, it even writes contains for you, which is pretty nice. So this tool is really good to go. So you still need to know expat because, as you know, some cases it doesn't resolve. So you should not rely, it always helps you. But it's giving a really good head start for this. Okay? And some other cases, like with name, like you click on it, and there's no difference here. You still inspect this, and it still gives you some information, right? Just when it's hidden, probably it's not going to work. It's still somewhere on the page, just not visible. And when you click on it, and you evaluate this expat, it shows it on the screen. Okay. So sometimes there's some elements, but they're just not visible. So we'll talk about how to deal with those elements later. Okay. And other cases are similar. We have some pages here, and we have some buttons on here. So any questions? So we'll go for last examples in the next lesson, just to give you some more practice to have. So any questions, anything like for 10, 11, or 12? So just to highlight here, see, like now it says field is required. So when I right click on it, it pretty nicely gives me what is it about, right? But if I change to something, now it's hidden. Now it's not here in the list, but it's hidden, but it's still in the HTML page. See, so sometimes expat is found, but element not visible. So there's two different concepts that element page contains element and element is visible on the page. It does two different assertions that you can make with WebDriver help. So sometimes XPath doesn't help you with this. Okay. So the way it works is if I refresh the page completely, and then I try this XPath, it's not going to find it because it's generated only when I have error. But once it's generated, it's hidden, but it's still on the page. Sometimes there can be cases like this. Make sense? And then WebDriver functions that actually verify it will help you. All right, I think so. That's pretty much our lab here. So let's talk about our homework. So first of all, those slides are under this URL. So you have we'll move them later, like to some. You get access to portal.com, the course, which will have recordings. But for now, you can get it from skryabin.com/webdriver/slides. It has a PDF of slides that we have gone through today. And it also has a homework on the last page before last. What I would like you to do is to play with sample page more. So play with this and start from number 1. So just write XPath expressions. Just write them in text. Right. Number 1, this is XPath answer. Number 2, this is XPath answer. So I would like you to find for required field labels. And I did it on purpose because automatic tool would not give you the ideal answer. So change it to like name or ID or whatever you find the best. That's number 1. Just put here, since you need more practice with selects, make sure you put your own country of origin, XPath, if there is present. Date label using text, and date label with no use of text. So using text will help you with the tool, but no use of text is what approach? Using anchor. So you select neighboring field and then move there. Okay. And same for this span. Allow contact me via email or phone using partial text and without using partial text. Some other means. Pretty much same as using anchor. Okay. And that's pretty much it. So refer to your XPath cheat sheet for examples. And I would like to ask you, so next lesson we're going to have on Thursday, 7. Please send me your result before that lesson. So just play with it more. You can do it tomorrow. I think it's ideal to refresh the memory. I think if you repeat it tomorrow, I think at least 80% of this new information will stay. If you don't review it, you'll keep losing it. That's the way it works. So keep practicing.
So if you have time and you finish this sample page, you can simply open the message.com or USPS and try to find XPaths on the page.
Exactly. So yeah, if you are done with all this, you want more fun, just open any page. Like we look at Amazon, right? So just try to explore and see, okay, if I have this one, so how do I do? Same approach, so you just do inspect. So make sure first time you open it, see it's not there, right? So make sure you open this guy first, is Cropat. So once it's open and you do inspect again, it starts helping you with this XPath. So if I click again on the same place, see, like in this case, it's not ideal. So you might want to change it, but for this field, it looks pretty decent, XPath. Any questions? All right, guys. So next, so congratulations, we have begun. Next lesson, we're going to install framework and start writing some Cucumber tests using this XPath we have learned.